Resilience, burnout, mental health, it's all rather heavy. And what so often happens during talks or seminars on these weighty areas is there's a lot of telling to the people who attend. Do this more, do that less. And there's not a lot of guiding. And to have your mind change and then move in a new direction in your life takes a lot of work and discomfort. So for this necessary discomfort, in the name of growth today, I will ask you to wade in the murky waters of our early days of the pandemic. So you can fasten and adjust your seatbelts for the bumpy ride back to the recent past, or you can opt out of the messiness altogether and hit the breakfast spread one more time. And I completely get that. I know how strong the need is to put aside those darkest moments of the recent past, to forget all of the lockdowns and the uncertainty and the fear. But it's that compulsion to put it all away that I think is worth considering. That need to say that we have moved on. I've had people say this to me in one way or another. Yeah, that was bad. We're good now, and that bad stuff is done. Let's just adjust to our new normal. Now, whatever this new normal actually is, I'm not quite sure, but I'm sure that we are living it as very different people. This pandemic aftermath feels a lot wearier to me. It feels gnarlier, definitely angrier. I am definitely angrier, and so is everyone around me. Now, anger is a very interesting emotion because according to psychologists, it's an incomplete one. It's only the preview to a far more layered story. I learned this during the earlier months of the pandemic when I enlisted the help of a child psychologist to help navigate my older son's raging outbursts of frustration during lockdowns. And she introduced us to the anger iceberg. Anger, she said, is the tip of an iceberg. It's the part of an iceberg that sits above the water, the part that we can actually see. But most of the iceberg is underwater and out of sight. And like an iceberg, anger is just the most visible manifestation of more complex and deeper sets of emotions, like disappointment and frustration and guilt and insecurity and shame, helplessness, anxiety, fear, loneliness, sadness. It got me thinking about how prominent anger can be in our medical workplaces. Rather than explore and navigate the understandably messy feelings that arise from and underlie the challenging work we all do, we cope in the most culturally appropriate and sanctioned way we know how. We get mad. And nothing makes us more mad at work when things don't go as planned. Yes, failure makes us very mad. Failure in our efficiency-based workplaces is the real F word. To be clear, when I say failure, I mean feeling as though we have been unable to achieve a desired outcome. When things do not turn out the way we wanted them to, the way we worked our butts off to achieve, the way we promised they would, the way we believed they would. Failure, conceptualized in this way as an unwanted outcome, is weightier and heavier, more personal and more existentially burdensome. So much so that it's uncomfortable to think about. So we don't think about it really. What we do with our feelings of failure is what we always do with uncomfortable things in our professional world. We cope with them. We react, often angrily, in all sorts of ways around how we truly feel. But if the very smart child psychologist is to be believed, our anger around failure is just the tip of an iceberg, weighed down by far more intricate and often painfully revealing feelings submerged under the surface. The reason why we bury and cope instead of excavate and examine is found when we remember the moments when we were the most impressionable on all those first days. First day of grade school, first day of high school, first day of university, first day in the medical, nursing, respiratory therapy program, first day of grad school, first day of the new job, first day arriving in the position that you have today. It is on those first days when we arrive as outsiders and do everything we believe we must to become insiders. We followed the leads of those who looked like they belonged in the hopes that we too could possess that ownership someday. It's the law of any jungle. The newest animal avoids being eaten by identifying the most dominant of the pack and watches and learns and emulates. That's enculturation, learning how to respond, react, behave, and work by watching how everyone within the culture you're newly part of is doing it. We learn to cope in our new, fast-paced, exciting, but also stressful workplace culture by watching other people coping. At best, it means skill building in areas of teamwork, communication, leadership. But intense, often high stakes moments, it also means learning to manage discomfort and distress in angry ways. Cruelty disguised as humor, deriding colleagues or other teams, and freezing people out by disengaging from communication altogether. Anything except actually articulating our discomfort and distress.
Jim, Patrick, Tower 5 elevator.
Wouldn't it be funny if it was on me?
Jim, Patrick, Tower 5 elevator.
Code white at the microphone.
Jim, Patrick, Tower 5 elevator.
So anything except actually articulating our discomfort and distress, all that lies beneath the tip of the iceberg. And for the record, in my professional life, I have done all those angry things far too many times that I can bear to recall. We all learned on all those first days that to cope in this angry way is more culturally appropriate than it is to be truthful about how difficult it is to do your amazing job. Difficult and amazing. These are two words that I want etched on my tombstone. She was so difficult and amazing. But also the two words that remind us of the duality of healthcare work, like yours, where life and death are inextricably and prominently paired at all times. Your work will always be reliably two things at once, difficult and amazing. It's when we bury the difficult, the feelings generated by failure, instead of trying to understand it, that we turn to coping and miss finding the amazing, the meaning inside that experience. Our notion of failure and the meaning we give it tells us a lot about the workplace culture we inhabit and its attendant values. Think about it. By virtue of the amount of time and reverence given to some things, and by default, the lack of attention and adulation given to others, we tacitly afford the former an importance, the hard skills, and the latter a slight. Soft skills is what we quaintly and dismissively call those. It naturally follows that those things in our workplace culture that capture our keenest attention and enthusiasm and money and accolades are the very things we associate with success. And in our workplace cultures, nothing attracts more attention and is given more importance than a good outcome, the getting it done. Oh dear.
Cancel, code white, Jim Pattison 5 elevator. Cancel, code white, Jim Pattison 5 elevator. Cancel, code white, Jim Pattison 5 elevator.
And in our workplace culture, nothing attracts more attention or is given more importance than getting things done. Fix it, take care of it, finish it, submit it, handle it, make it work. The action words we use to define success, conversely, help us define failure. So if I'm unable to fix it, or I can't take care of it, or something isn't handled, or it doesn't work, what are we? What am I but an abject failure? When the value of the work we do every day is determined solely by which end of this cruelly constructed dichotomy of succeed or fail we land, and of what use is the majority of time we spend toiling away when it falls on the wrong side? What is the meaning of all the time we spend in between success and failure, especially when things don't turn out the way we wanted? Well, it's in that very space in between where we spend all our time on the how of our jobs. The worrying, the thinking, the weighing, the researching, the listening, the supporting, the noticing, the reassessing, the examining, the teaching, the learning, the becoming who we are. Contemporary English philosopher Alain de Botton mercifully challenges our constructs of success and failure when he says, a lot of the time, our ideas about what it would mean to be successful are not our own. Different from the idea of failure and success as two opposing outcomes, wherein stretching to reach one end while desperately avoiding the other obscures the meaning found in the space between them, the coexistence of struggle and growth situates us firmly within an experience and positions us to find meaning in the middle of it. All this to say, there is a great deal to be learned from our suffering. Suffering is a hard word for us in our jobs and in our experiences to own for ourselves. These feelings make you suffer, is what my therapist had said to me many years ago at a time of personal crisis. I bristled at the word and objected to its use in relation to my problems. I told him, I have seen suffering in the intensive care unit where I work, and this is not that, I assure you. Then he clarified to me what the experience of not physical, but psychological suffering was. The feeling of prolonged emotional or psychological distress in the wake of an unexpected or unwanted outcome. The feeling that comes from a sense of failure, like the death of someone you love, or the end of a relationship, or losing a job, or living through the uncertainty of a pandemic for years on end. Probably the most useful insights on the experience of suffering I've ever read came from the psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl in his book, Man's Search for Meaning. In it, he says we find meaning in our lives in three main ways: through our work and the purpose it gives us, through love, which we often demonstrate by doing things for other people, and through suffering, which he says is part of the human experience. It's how we respond to our suffering, what we learn from it, that adds meaning to our lives. This idea that we evolve most significantly through difficult times is a really ancient one. The wound is the place where light enters you. Those are the words from the 13th century Persian poet Rumi. Rumi's words were carried through centuries, through Frankl's writings from the 1960s to Leonard Cohen, our beloved Canadian poet and songwriter, who used this imagery in his song Anthem when he wrote, "There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in." It's in the openings, the breaks, where we learn most, what gives rise to the opportunities for us to be better and do better and see what can be better. This is not about endurance. It's about examination, looking closely at those moments where we suffered the most to gain an understanding about ourselves. Failure, imagined like this, isn't the opposite of success. It's comprised within it. They coexist. In much the same way that we have perilously defined success in opposition to failure, we have, in medicine, erroneously adopted a notion of resilience in opposition to suffering. I realize this amid the ongoing waves of the worst of the pandemic. when I was busier than I had ever been with requests to speak to audiences all over the world about resilience. In particular, how to stay resilient during the pandemic. The invitations to speak about resilience would come in the form of very specific questions. It would be, can you give us some insights on how we can become more resilient? What things can we do every day to boost our resilience? Any advice about staying resilient through all of this? When those were the questions posed to me, I had to decipher what was really being asked. When most people ask me about resilience, what they mean is staying strong. Just keep going, pushing through. Tell us how to meet our standards, do our best work, inspire our teams, be excellent leaders, not burn out, and keep going, no matter how punishing the disasters are around us. And this is how we conceive of resilience at work. That you made it to the end is what matters most. How you got there and what you personally and your team went through in the process doesn't. Well, as it turns out, we all went through a hell of a lot to make it to today. And now, especially in those early pandemic days, I want you to think back on your first pandemic months. And as you do that, I will tell you a little bit about mine. The essence of it can be illustrated through one particular afternoon. It was during the first lockdown of 2020, within the purgatory we quaintly referred to as online homeschooling. I was trapped in my house working as the admin assistant to a 4th and 6th grader who, as far as bosses go, were assholes. I could not leave the prison that was the hallway between their 2 bedrooms for more than 10 minutes before one of them was yelling at me to help print something or scan something else. It was so incessant and unrelenting that the only place I could hang out until the next set of demands was in the front of the hallway linen closet between their bedroom doors. So one afternoon, I opened this linen closet and was faced with a behemoth of sheets and pillowcases. How on earth does a family of 4 end up with 324 incomplete sets of bed linens? What kind of fresh hell have I created? With a ferocity I can only imagine is akin to fighting off a lion, I pulled everything out. My arms were whipping around like windmills, yanking every last overstretched fitted sheet and unmatched pillowcase to the ground. And then, exhausted, I fall to my knees, drowning in this maniacally made puddle of polyester and cotton, just not knowing what to do about all of it. And I started to cry. It was at that moment that my then 10-year-old son, Jack, opened his bedroom door expecting to find me with a stapler ready. And instead, he finds this fuming tracksuited mess in the eye of a fabric tornado. He then shuts his door very carefully and hollers to his brother in the adjacent room, "Why is mom crying in the sheets?" I sat there for several minutes. I was so frustrated. I was so angry. The anger and frustration turned into hopelessness. Who knows how long this thing is going to go on for? I may as well make myself comfortable. This pile of sheets is now where I live. Life is over. And then shame started to hit me. There I was with my healthy family, still gainfully employed, while other people were getting sick or mourning loved ones or losing their jobs. I just sat there and I cried, an absolute mess of fear and despair and guilt. And it was at this time, ironically, when my email inbox was full of invitations to please come and speak to our group about how our team can stay resilient through the pandemic. Even now, as we've emerged from lockdowns and isolation, the invitations that I've been getting to discuss resilience are not waning, they're increasing. And why is that? It's because what the ads and the posters in our workplaces say we are, resilient people, resilient communities who've survived a plague, is at odds with how we feel privately. We don't feel the relief and accomplishment we expect resilience to bring us because we have not actually achieved real resilience. We've just barreled through a life-changing disaster without ever looking up. That silent dissonance between what we say we feel and what is actually felt can speak volumes, especially when the distance between the two grows into a wide and painful chasm. Like right now, the precisely painful moment in we're right now is one where we have victoriously declared ourselves to be resilient teams, but are left privately struggling with why we don't feel like we are. I wholeheartedly believe that for me at work right now is harder than any of the times in the 3 years before. Because even more trying than the pandemic had been is the current moment, the aftermath of all of that. The feeling like you're finally buckling under the weight of almost 3 years of unexamined suffering, of trying to forget how bad it all got and how scared we all were, of not coming to terms with how we have all been irrevocably changed. So for us to get to the crux of what resilience is actually about, it's important that we repeatedly remind ourselves precisely what resilience is not about. It is not about how to keep going or push through or withstand or stay afloat. Resilience is not the absence of the feeling of difficulty or distress. Resilience is the ability to adapt, recover, and grow following adversity. So think about that. Adapting to, recovering from, and growing. That is a very purposeful series of actions. I shared some of my pandemic story with you. Now consider your own in those first months. When your everyday life changed, how did you adjust? How did you recover from that adjustment? Have you recovered from it? What have you learned about yourself through that adjustment? How have you changed? And how have you grown? When we see resilience as a transformational process, as a growing from, rather than getting through, we must understand what we need to be doing to facilitate that growth process. So before I go on, I want all of you to indulge me in a very small exercise, a private one, okay? So you all have your phones or something to write with. You're going to make a list for me, okay? So get your list app or your piece of paper. Okay, and I want you all to do this. What you're going to write is only for you to see. This is nothing to be shared. It's just for you. I'm going to put on my stopwatch for 1 minute, okay? And when I say go, I want you to list the first things that come to your mind, okay? When I tell you what you're gonna list. I want you to list all the things in your life right now that are really pissing you off. Go. Okay, stop. I'm going to take 1 more minute from you. So take a few beats down from that list and you're gonna make another list. Okay, so now when I say go, I want you to write down all the things in your life that just make you happy and that you're grateful for, all the good things. People, things to look forward to, whatever comes to your mind, the good things. Okay, stop. Now keep those handy. I'm gonna get you to refer to them in a little bit, okay? And thank you for doing that. When the pandemic first happened, and I was stuck in a mess of fear and hopelessness and shame, I hadn't yet taken the time or gathered the strength and courage to look at what those feelings represented. And it was grief. I, just like everyone else, had lost my familiar way of living my life. And in not allowing myself to look beyond my anger, to face and sit with the underlying pain of my own personal private losses and my growing fears, I buried myself further under the hallway sheets and under those heavy feelings. My understanding of grief came not by way of intellectual exploration, but unfortunately by the best teacher, the lived experience. Shortly after I finished my medical training and started my current job, I entered a 3-year period marked by the joy of the birth of my 2 sons and the utter horror of watching my dad die of terminal cancer. And the cruel contrast of watching my boys grow while my dad disappeared just literally broke me. I truly believed that when my father took his last breath, that I would die with him. I could not have imagined a physical pain so great, so intolerable, and so shockingly foreign to me, in spite of the work I did with dying patients every day. I was just shattered by his death. I was adrift in my sadness and suffocating under the responsibilities that come with new parenthood, and utterly terrified of going back to work to a place where the conversations around death and dying are ubiquitous. My coping skills, as I had learned them, unsurprisingly, had failed me. But with 2 kids under the age of 4 who deserved an attentive and engaged mother, a husband who I love more than anybody, a mom who now needed support, and a career I had worked so hard to cultivate, I had no choice. I had to return to my life and recover from this awfulness, but I had no idea how I would do this. The solution was delivered to me when one of my mentors made an offer. Could she refer me to a therapist for grief counseling? And with no other good ideas and me largely dysfunctional, I took her up on it. The first thing I told my new psychiatrist was that I needed help sleeping. Since my dad had died, I just couldn't sleep. And so he asks me, well, what do you do what happens when you try to fall asleep? And I said, I find myself thinking about my dad and I don't want to. So I just sit up and I get out of bed. And he goes, well, why do you do that? And I said, well, I don't want to think about him. So I try to distract myself with other things. And he says, well, why don't you want to think about him? And I said, because then I'm going to get sad and then I'm going to cry and I'm going to just not be able to even breathe with all the crying. And I don't want to keep going through that. So I want to think about something else. And he looks at me for a few seconds and he says, you know, Shelly, the hardest thing in the world to do is not think about something. If you just let it happen and do think about your dad and feel sad and cry and keep feeling sad and cry, you know what will happen then, right? And I am like, what? And he says, nothing. You'll be okay. And you may even fall asleep. Yeah. Facing the pain of my loss was all-consuming, and the sadness was utterly draining. But after I sat in the depths of it for some time, I was eventually ready to step out of it. The story of losing him became less dominant, and what emerged were memories of good things and happier times. And it was as though my avoidance of grief became this barrier to my being able to experience joy again. And in the same way, when the pandemic struck, until I confronted what I felt was taken from me, until I sat in the middle of those losses and examined each one, only then could I move forward and start to see what I had to be grateful for and what there may still be to look forward to. When I made the purposeful decision to get up off the floor out of my pandemic paralysis and write down all the things that were upsetting me, I wrote and I wrote and I wrote. And it flowed with such a vigor, like a weary dam breaking down under the force of some water that had been held back. And there it was. It was on the screen of my laptop. It was out of my head. No more energy spent, in the words of my therapist, trying not to think about it. And just writing it all down made me feel better, as though I gained access to thoughts and memories and clarity I couldn't reach when I was being held back by the heavier feelings. And this is important. It did not make the pandemic go away, and it did not magically transport my children back to school. It was not a solution, and yet the process of it made me feel better, and I could see again. So I go back to the hallway and I look at this mountain of sheets and pillowcases and I separate the ones to discard or donate. And then I start folding the ones that I would keep. And so when I was ready to put the keepers back into the closet, it's a pretty deep closet, and I see at the back of one of the shelves, there's this plastic bag that's compressed. And I pull it out and I open the bag and I find these 2 baby blankets that my mom had knit for my sons when they were born. And these are blankets that I obviously accused my husband of carelessly throwing away. The amazing. When there is more difficult, we have to be more vigilant about locating the amazing, but it's always there, sometimes buried in the very back of an obscenely overstuffed linen closet. The crucial step then, the one that we can't skip or ignore, is the sitting in and the sitting with all the moments we naturally want to look away from, the ones that make us so mad. It's looking deeper and beyond the tip of the iceberg. When we talk ourselves out of feeling the way we do, when we try not to think about our own distress, we nullify ourselves and silence our experiences. And that's when we cope. We cope when we don't examine the reasons behind unpleasant feelings, the meaning they carry, and the lessons they provide us to move forward. We miss opportunities to understand ourselves and to evolve and to do better and feel better, and to locate the amazing within that discovery. This self-examination that resilience requires, the adapting, the recovering, the growing, reveals the authentic and mindful answer to the question you must ask yourself regularly, and especially during your most challenging moments: how am I? So now take out those lists. And I'll remind you, there are lists that took you 2 minutes to create. What these are a representation of your here and now, without judgment, with no right or wrong. It's what you've noticed about now for you. In mindfulness practice, self-awareness begins with this noticing. The noticing of your thoughts as they arise. And the next step is to become curious about them. I wonder why I wrote that. I wonder what that means. I wonder what that means about what I need to do next. So let's do it. Just thoughts. What emotions do they bring up for you and why? What do those feelings make you want to think about? What do they make you want to do or not do? What is the meaning of those thoughts to me right now? This is what mindfulness and self-awareness, all these hot button things, this is what it actually looks like in real time. Yes, it can be difficult, but it can also amaze you. And it is the necessary internal work of getting to real resilience. To be mindful and self-aware in this way requires all of us to actively rebel against the very ways in which we've been enculturated to envision success and failure. Every day, we are incentivized and pressured to aim for outcomes in all facets of our work without noticing how it is we are working to get there, how we are changing and growing and learning. The meaning of what you do every day at work lies in the process, the how, not in the outcome. So now, while this type of mindfulness is crucial for doing the internal work of resilience building, it's not the whole story. It's not enough. There is an essential external component. What we know from good psychological studies is that to achieve resilience, to overcome, learn from, and grow beyond setbacks, we must be able to rely on and access our deep connections with people, personally and professionally. It's no coincidence that our external framework for resilience faltered significantly during lockdowns and social distancing. The important people who function as crucial bolsters in our lives had to be avoided. But healthcare workers, we came to work. And our workplace was our main communal space outside our homes, and our colleagues became those bolsters. In the hundreds and hundreds of conversations I've had about burnout and resilience with healthcare workers around the world, across continents, whether in resource-rich cities or desperately strapped rural towns, the source of their awe and reverence was reproducible each time. Thank goodness we had each other. I only got through the worst times at work in the last few years because of my colleagues, my team, my friends. As a healthcare community, our story of resilience is in fact a story about the life-saving importance of meaningful work relationships. And I'm not talking about civility or professionalism. I'm talking about friendship. It's not lost on me that I'm speaking to a very multidisciplinary group of workers today. And this is very poignant for me because I often remark on the ways in which I was raised and trained and embraced by my allied healthcare colleagues from nursing, respiratory therapy, nutrition, pharmacy, social work, and how that was foundational to my thriving in the workplace. I don't just know the team of professionals that I work with, I know about them, and they know about me too. That knowing has carried me through too many crises to count, personal and professional. That knowing has forgiven me when I've misbehaved and trusted me when I needed allies. Just as the weakened levees are the first to break under pressure, the sturdiest connections stand up to the strain. The pandemic certainly blew holes through the weaknesses in our healthcare system. That we have endured and grown has been because our relationships with each other, as friends and colleagues, caring and advocating for patients and their families. But in this, the aftermath of the worst of the pandemic, the solidarity and the unity that came from a shared sense of fear and uncertainty is being replaced with overwhelming fatigue and frustration and impatience, and a regression back to our bad habits of coping. So when mindfulness, those little exercises that we do, when mindfulness eludes us, because it will, and coping is our habitual default stance, because it is, we need our people, our friends, to show us how much we need them. During all the lockdowns, I got so good at believing I didn't need anyone outside the home that when we could slowly start to convene again safely, I did everything I could to avoid it. Until moments of surprise would upend my plans. A friend would call me or text me a Zoom link or appear at my door with coffee to go for a walk, and I would explode with energy. When just moments before, I was in the process of emulsifying into a puddle on my couch, I was now manically talking or laughing or crying. I got pulled out of my pandemic paralysis again, but this time in a way that I did not know that I needed. My friends just made it far easier for me to realize it. Those surprise interventions did for me what we all need to do for each other and ultimately ourselves, especially at work. We need to go first. Going first is what I call taking the responsibility away from someone who is in need of a connection by offering it to them so they don't have to ask. Like when my friends show up unannounced, or when my family doctor, a friend and colleague whom I've known since I was 19, knew I needed to go on medication for postpartum anxiety, or when a mentor from years ago helped me find the therapist when my dad died. I didn't have to find my own way through my own darkness to be helped. They turned on the lights for me. This brings us to an important distinction I think we all need to make within the how of our work, the distinction between reward and joy. Our work, especially your work, at its very best, is deeply rewarding. That's when it feels like a privilege, an honor, deeply fulfilling, and very stimulating. But my joy does not come from there. My joy is for my friends, the ones I can rely on to step in and go first and ask me amid the struggle, how are you? It's at those times when an authentic ask could make all the difference. It could be an actual type of salvation. I remember first realizing how true this was when I returned to work after my second maternity leave. So my sons are 20 months apart. And that's because you can get pregnant while you're breastfeeding. So write that down. We were elated. Anyway, I was on my second maternity leave, and my older son wasn't yet one, like two, right? So he is just starting to talk, and I'm reading this book called How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and How to Listen So Kids Will Talk. Okay? And in this book, it says that toddlers are trying to find language to deal with their emotions, but they don't have the language. So they often act out and have tantrums until they can find language. So what it tells you to do is, like, when you're in the grocery store and this kid is like screaming and throwing stuff around, you are supposed to give them the word for their emotion, but you're supposed to mirror their intensity. So you're supposed to get to eye level of this lunatic, and you're supposed to go, wow, you look so mad. Are you mad? Because you look really mad, right? And you're supposed to punch mad, right? And then he goes, I'm mad because, and you don't care why he's mad. You need this to stop, right? So, but the theory is that when he has the word to describe the feeling, he will calm down. Okay, so this is what I was doing for that whole mat leave. It's like, you look sad, you look mad, all that, right? So I come back to work, and I'm in one of the ICUs, and I'm, kind of checking on the patients or whatever. And at the part of the unit where there's all the names of the patients and the bed allocations, the charge nurse is standing there, and I see one of my colleagues come in, who's a surgical colleague. So comes in, and he looks at this board, and then he looks at the nurse, and I can see that very quickly he's doing the calculation that he has a case that's going to the OR, and there's no bed here, as in, where is this patient going to go, right? And so this is all I see, is that he's doing this and then doing this, and then she's looking at the clipboard as though a bed's going to appear out of the clipboard, right? And it's really getting tense, and there's a lot of this going on, and she's kind of like this. So I go, I better go up there and see what's up, right? Because I'm in charge. So I go there, and there's all this going on, and immediately, without thinking anything at all, I go, you look so mad. And he's like, what? And I go, you look mad. Are you mad? And he goes, yeah, I'm mad. I'm like, yeah, I could tell. Like, what's up? And he goes, well, I have this second case that's about to go into the OR, and I don't know if there's going to be a bed. So I'm just worried about, where I'm going to put this patient. I'm like, oh man, I get it. That would make me mad too. And he's like, yeah. And then he leaves. And the charge nurse looks at me and goes, what the fuck was that? Right? Sorry, BC transplant, I swear a lot. And I'm like, I don't know, but I think this is how I talk now. If every angry moment meant someone was an asshole, we'd have an asshole pandemic, for which, as a medical expert, I can assure you, there is no vaccine. The reality is that there are far more bad days than there are actual assholes. I mean, there's always a psychopath or two amongst us, but the hero and villain narrative is best left to those infernal superhero movies and other works of reductive fiction. For most of us, there's so much more going on that we can't see beneath the surface, beneath the anger. And so many of us, on any given bad day, are one merciful question away from being able to reach deeper and moving beyond that anger. Are you okay? That ask from a friend at work when I really need it is, for me, a moment of exhalatory, comforting, and relieving joy. The joy we do experience in our work must not be defined solely by our clinical outcomes. That's not only far too reductive, it's also far too fragile and way too precarious and incomplete. The long-lasting relationships we build in the workplace are foundational to our professional joy. These are bonds we created through the difficult and amazing process of our work. Those friendships we've made in pursuit of the reward of being able to do good work. Imagine this way, professional joy is authentically resilient. It's not plowing ahead amid the crises and chaos. It's carrying each other through obstacles and embracing each other during the wins. If we each consider the part we can individually play in supporting one another by going first and offering the attention to listen, at some point, you will all be the beneficiaries of this therapeutic kindness. You will, at some point, be the person receiving the call on the couch you didn't know you needed. We will all have contributed to making ourselves a more resilient community of people by caring about one another's thriving. You can actually create a workplace culture of self-awareness, recovery, growth, and support, a culture of true resilience and the end of coping. Because we, as members of our workplace cultures, not only live within it, we're responsible for creating it. So what if we, the creators of our culture, the ones who decide what it is we do and do not value, reimagine the dichotomy of success and failure as a confluence of experiences in need of examination to find meaning and purpose, an examination that will culminate in a deeper, lasting sense of resilience? What if we decided that by cultivating this new perspective through caring for ourselves and each other, we are creating a resilient and healthy workplace that will lead to a greater well-being in each worker, and so inevitable higher quality work? We all just need to start now, today, by asking ourselves two crucial questions at work every day. Question one, how am I? You must take stock of where you are emotionally. Those are your 2 minutes of mindfulness, those lists that you made. You know how to do this now. Take 2 minutes wherever you can in your day and make your lists, the bad and the good. Remember, you're not looking for a solution, you're looking for meaning. What are these moments telling you about what is and isn't important to you? What you need more of to feel better? On any given day, what I need more of is fresh air with my dog, buying myself a gift on Amazon with same-day delivery, eating McDonald's French fries, exercise, baking, family movie night, calling my mom, deciding not to call my mom, getting my nails done, watching Beverly Hills Cop starring my fantasy soulmate Eddie Murphy, coffee with a friend who reliably makes me laugh, the Wordle with my kids, the New York Times crossword puzzle alone, doing nothing while sitting next to my husband, or watching Bob's Burgers while I'm cooking. What is the meaning behind your suffering, and what is it telling you about what you need? Sometimes the answer is an animated TV show, but sometimes, importantly, it is more. By the end of 2021, I needed more. After several pandemic waves and lockdowns, amid dealing with my own mounting exhaustion, the sad departure of colleagues who had just had enough, the floundering of junior doctors I supervised who needed so much emotional support, the anxieties manifested in my children through years of lockdowns and isolation, it had finally been too much. That was when the only thing I found myself looking forward to in the day was a glass of red wine, or two, or more. How does the ancient proverb go? There, but for the grace of God, go I. Much to the dismay of my mom, I'm not a spiritual or religious person, but I do believe in the frailty of the human condition. I am no less frail than all the patients I saw who suffered in tragic ways in the last few years, not because of COVID, but because of the strain of living through a pandemic, through missed medical appointments, prolonged isolation, exacerbated mental illness, and addiction. So in early 2022, when I sat with my human frailty, when I made that truth more pressing than shame or self-consciousness or judgment of my vulnerability, I finally dialed the phone number I had last used 5 years before and made an appointment again to see my therapist. It was good and it has helped. I am still a work in progress. So again, ask yourself every day, because every day is a little different, how am I? You can only know which direction is forward when you know where you are right now. Notice your feelings and be curious about what they mean. And then question 2, how is everyone else? To know this, go first. Connect with someone you haven't caught up with in a while, or ask a colleague, how are you? With a commitment to truly listen. Please remember, you don't need the answer or the solution to their problems to help them feel better. This isn't about fixing or curing or solving or handling or managing. This is about the space we offer to someone in need as an act of friendship. It's about taking note of the people around you who bring you joy in the workplace and going first. Using these 2 guiding questions, how am I? How is everyone else? By noticing and taking note of, I think we can redefine our workplace cultures by reimagining success and failure as a continuum of experiences that are, by their very nature, difficult and amazing. By centering our values on our personal and communal resilience as a path to doing this good work. And that, my friends, is how you start a cultural revolution. And it can start right now, today. Yes, I know that we've all been through a lot of difficult in the last few years, but I can't say that it's a bad thing if in the end, we all come out of that difficult with some hard-won, meaningful and lasting resilience. That is truly amazing. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Shelly. That was truly awesome. And thank you for sharing. I think hopefully we have some questions here. Sometimes it's hard to ask questions after something like this, but so I'm looking at the Slido, and I don't. The only thing I want to share is the fact that I had the same thing first on both lists. My kids. So
Very common.
It just popped out there, but so yeah, please.
I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Is this working? Okay. I just want to say thank you. I thought that was excellent. And
Thanks.
it really speaks to sort of bringing humanity back into the work that we do, which I think we can all experience, or we have all experienced sort of the pressures and the pace, and it's really hard to carve out time to give some space to really call out that necessary connection with our colleagues. And I think so you've really just, given some examples of very easy ways to bring in some mindfulness into the busy workplace that doesn't take a lot of time, but it's just, the intent and being deliberate about bringing that into our workplace. So I just thank you. It's a really excellent presentation.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions or thoughts, things you want to share? Okay, and I think, again, this is one of the things that involves opening up, and not everybody is
Yes,
ready
absolutely.
for that now, but I don't know if there's anything else you want to add, Shelly?
No, I just, I take this as a compliment. Genuinely, I could see all of your eyes paying attention. But I should say this at the very beginning. Nothing about what I talk about has anything to do with having things solved. It is, as I said, I'm very much a work in progress. And the things that I like to talk about are things that I have learned through many, many misadventures and pain. And I think that my hope about that is that it's useful. That's it. Okay, so I hope it doesn't appear as it's coming from a place of having figured it out, because it's not. And I think that's the most comforting thing for me, is that it's not about the figuring it out. It's about that you're trying to do that. Right. So I would also just like to say I'm so grateful to the work that you all do. And I know how hard it is, and I know what the stakes are. And you just need to know that at the end of the day, you're good people trying to help other people. And that's always a good thing to fall back on. That will always be true. So that's it. Thanks.
Thanks, Shelly. I wish somebody had talked to me about this about 20 years ago or 3 years ago, I think, because it was, resilience was not a word we actually used, but you just did it and you bury it, and it's not good to do that. So thank you for sharing ways to forward.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thanks so much again.